So hello and welcome to another one of my interview series, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Carol Evans. Hello Carol.
Hello Gerard.
Hi. Now regular listeners will have heard my interview with Nick Evans, and Carol is actually Nick's mum. And one thing that's quite interesting for me, Carol, on that level is that you're about the same age as my mum. And but it would appear you've had a very different kind of life trajectory in that sense. My mum just kind of was always a Catholic, and was very sort of devoted to the Catholic Church. But I've had to find out any kind of alternatives to that myself, I suppose, which led me to sort of naturally sort of think, oh, how interesting it would have been to, if my mum had got into all this sort of thing. So I wondered if we could start off by sort of, if you could tell me a little bit about your upbringing and how you kind of started getting into the kind of whole yoga meditation thing, how you encountered it.
Well, possibly the most interesting and unusual aspect to start with was that I can remember being about 8 years old, and we moved to a new place in Swansea, not the place where I'd been born, which had been a bit remote and sort of cut off from everything. We moved to a more sort of accessible area where I noticed as a little girl of 8-ish, maybe 7, that there were quite a lot of churches around. And I can't have had that earlier. So there was a Baptist and a Congregationalist and a Church of England. And I was very interested in this. And I can remember thinking, right, I'll go around all of them until I find God. I'll see which one has got God in, and then I'll join that.
Right.
My mother had been been brought up a Baptist. I wasn't aware that my father had any religious affiliation, and neither did my older sisters. So this was a purely spontaneous thing that came from inside me, and a bit odd, really. So I started. In those days, you had a lot of freedom to roam. There was no fear. So as a little 7 or 8-year-old girl, I went off on a different Sunday each time to visit these churches to see where I would get this sense of, oh, God is here. And it really, I was quite disappointed because I didn't get that feeling anywhere very much. It seemed to be much more about ladies in smart hats planning the next Sunday school tea party, and that didn't seem to me to be something I could really relate to. There was one occasion that was different. My parents used to take the popular sort of working class Sunday newspapers of the time, which were the News of the World and People. And I didn't used to read them, but I used to see the headlines on a Sunday. And those papers used to stress horrors, really, on the front page. They were often about a murder or some awful crime.
Yeah.
And I was a very sensitive little girl, and I became aware of this and the sort of paradox. There was I looking for God, but what I was seeing all the time were accounts of sort of horrors and atrocities. So when I next went to, I think it was a Church of England Sunday school, there was a very nice Sunday school teacher there, a woman, a youngish woman, and I said to her, if God is good and kind and loving, why is there so much violence and murder and unhappiness in the world? And an incredible look of sort of kindness and understanding and sort of tenderness almost came over her. And she gave me a very light and loving little kiss on the cheek and said, well, when God created the world and mankind, he gave every individual the free will to choose how they were and what path they took. And that satisfied me for quite a long time. I no longer struggled with this paradox of the good, loving, kind God and what I was seeing all around me. So that was the sort of first phase, and it reinforced my interest in religion, and I took something that was on offer at that time, which was I think Bible studies examination or something, which wasn't school based, but you would go to a church and you would answer a series of questions on the New Testament, and you would receive a kind of a prize or an accolade if you passed it. And I remember passing that with flying colours. So that kind of understanding carried me through to my teenage years.
Right. Okay. And what happened then? Did you feel that? Did you go through a period of disillusionment, or?
Not so much disillusionment, but a redirection of my energies, which were like the energies of lots of teenagers. I rather started worshipping boys rather than God. Although I wouldn't say there was any kind of deliberate stepping away. It was just the natural course of evolution that teenagers go through. There were two sort of passions: my interest in boys who are attractive and clever, and my desire to lift myself out of my working class background, in which I'd seen on the part of my parents a lot of suffering and anxiety about poverty. And the other very strong thread was I mustn't end up like that, with that kind of worry and anxiety about the phrase my mother always used, making ends meet. It was a constant concern and struggle. Sure. So there was this redirection in interest in young men, and a redirection of interest in my studies and lifting myself away from that particular situation that I'd been born into. So school and my subjects and doing well became the sort of the twin passion, and there were no religious studies I could have chosen. That wasn't a subject on offer. Instead, I developed a passion for languages, and in particular French. So my orientation for the next, till I went to university, I suppose, was enjoying myself in the glorious seaside and countryside of Swansea, where I was born. So I was lucky in that respect. I had a very natural and early taste for beauty, because that part of the world, I don't know if you know it or if you're listening.
I do a little bit, yeah.
There's the Gower Coast, which is stunning, and there's a lot of really beautiful nature. So it was enjoying nature, enjoying my relationships I'd have a boyfriend. I wasn't promiscuous in any way at all. I would have a boyfriend at a time. And this passion for learning, for doing well at school, to go to university, which I would have been the first member of my family because my sisters didn't have that privilege. So let's say that spirituality and religion went onto the back burner.
Well, fair enough, yeah. And when did they re-enter your life? What age were you?
Let's see. I would say 29, 30.
Right.
So there was quite a long period when my new career and my marriage, and then when I was 29, Nick's birth, and that turned into quite a traumatic and difficult period because I had a severe childbirth illness. I had to take time off work for 2 years, I think it was, till Nick was about 2. And at the end of that period, I felt the need for mending myself, if you like, because there'd been another great trauma at 20, which had set me back terribly, really, was the death of my sister, who died at the age of 30. And that had a tremendous impact because she'd been the source of love and hope in my life, because it was a wonderful relationship. I somehow managed to repress that a bit from the age of 20 to 29, but it was as if the experience of childbirth and the trauma associated with it kind of re-emerged that grief and that difficulty, which is often something that happens to people who've repressed their grief because they couldn't handle it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
They couldn't handle the consequences. So my first step wasn't really towards spirituality. It was towards psychotherapy, which is a kind of lay spirituality, really. And if the practitioner comes from a spiritual background themselves, those qualities that we associate with spirituality are present. So they're capable of giving a sort of deep love for the soul and allowing a real kind of intimacy and understanding to flourish, which is healing in its own. It's healing in its own right. Sure. But during the same period, I did. That's to say, after the illness and the 2 years away from teaching, I was trying to balance 3 threads of my life, really. Being a good wife, a good mother, a good university lecturer, having some sort of a social life for the family and for myself, and getting quite exhausted, sort of mentally, emotionally, and I suppose beginning to feel a spiritual void at that time. So I looked around for something, and what popped up at that period quite naturally was Transcendental Meditation.
Okay.
TM.
What kind of period are we talking here?
Yes, let me recap. Let me see. I think we've reached the early 70s.
Okay, yeah. So it would have been quite popular then, Transcendental Meditation. It went through.
Yeah, well, it was pretty much the only thing very obviously on offer.
Yeah.
There were there were no Tibetan Buddhists around as far as I knew, or anything like that. But here locally in my hometown of Penarth,
yes,
there's Transcendental Meditation on offer. And I went and I learned that, and I liked it, and I found that it was just 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, which isn't a huge demand on a busy human being. And I did find those periods of respite when the mind did slow down, become quiet. And an amazing thing happened. I used to be very tired in the evenings, as if I wanted the day to finish by about 7 o'clock and go to bed to face the next day. But once I started doing that meditation from 6 till 6:20, I had a new evening in front of me. It sort of revived my capacity so much. So that was very, very worthwhile. And it also cured 2 conditions that I'd been battling with. One of them was sinusitis, and the other was bronchitis. And both those conditions cleared after the 6 years, because that's how long I kept up Transcendental Meditation. I spent 6 years practicing that, having benefit, but realizing that there was no spiritual, in inverted commas, content that I could find in it. So I suppose the old yearning that I'd had as a child for understanding God, for a more spiritual way of life, re-emerged as a consequence of those 6 years. And I've heard quite a few people who I've met later and on different spiritual paths saying that they began with TM and then found their way to whatever it was, that they found.
I was very young then, so I've only got a very sketchy memory of this existing, but was it controversial at the time?
It may have been in some quarters, because there was a charge, not a lot in my day. It was something like £30 for the whole course, and they would do checkups regularly. And I remember offering it to Nick as a gift, because they did it for little children. Yeah. And so I think he mentioned in his interview that he learned that at the age of about 6.
Yes.
And I offered it to my husband, Colin, who mainly used it to go off to sleep, but that was what he needed. Any controversy would have been the generalized suspicion of things coming from the East into this country that weren't familiar, by strange people called gurus. And I think possibly when the Beatles learned it and popularized it, it became a bit more respectable in some quarters.
Right, yeah. Gave people a reference point, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So you kept this up for 6 years, and what happened at the end of the 6 years? Did you want more, or?
Well, I think it was this need for spiritual content that wasn't there. It came from a much more scientific background. Right. than other traditions, and I didn't have that background or that understanding, so I didn't go down that route, which I think lots of people did.
Yeah.
I needed to do something else. I needed a shift, and around that time there was a greater interest in Buddhism. And there was a Buddhist retreat centre not terribly far from Cardiff called the Lam Rim Buddhist Centre, run by a Tibetan monk and his entourage. And I used to go there for courses and to learn Buddhist meditation, some of the theory. And these places, when I said I was looking for God when I was 8, it's not that I started to feel I'd found God, but I'd found, because the Buddhists don't have an awareness or a connection or a relationship with God. Their path is different. It's with the Buddha, and it's with calming your mind and
yes,
all sorts of deep and interesting things like compassion and wisdom. But there wasn't that tradition about, relating to God. But nonetheless, I found such qualities in the people who ran that centre, and I come away being so refreshed that satisfied me for quite a long time. And that led to other Buddhist investigations. And I found another Buddhist retreat centre, which was in mid-Wales, in a place called Rhyadr, a little Welsh hideaway called the Mindfulness. And there they used to run 7-day sort of intensive koan retreats and meditation retreats. So I did that for quite a while. And again, found a sort of peace and happiness. But lurking in the back of my mind was still, where is God in all this? Because, again, there was no reference whatsoever in Zen meditation places. Although, again, they were lovely people who were searching for the sort of qualities that are associated with, the Christian religion and belief in God and that sort of thing. The qualities were there and the intention was there, but the reference point wasn't there.
So you never lost sight of this reference point of God that you wanted throughout this kind of journey?
No, that's right. I certainly allowed it to go into sort of abeyance. The other thing that troubled me a bit with these traditions, both Buddhism and Transcendental Meditation, was the completely male orientation.
Ah, okay.
Or Tibetan monks were obviously monks are male. The whole hierarchy from the Dalai Lama down were male. The only role for women seemed to be nuns, and the nuns were there to service the monks, basically, cook for them, wash their clothes, and it was a very effaced and humble role that didn't recognize that they too might have powerful spiritual qualities to offer. And as I'd done my research and my thesis on Simone de Beauvoir, who may not ring bells with you.
No, I'm aware of Simone de Beauvoir, yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, good. And Sartre. I'd done my thesis on Simone de Beauvoir, who was the first great feminist to come onto my horizon. I spent 4 years in Paris. I got to meet her.
Really? Wow.
And I wrote my thesis on her. And I'd also felt, since a young girl who used to kind of run in the woods and climb trees and fences and like playing cricket and didn't give tuppence about dolls and prams, that this sort of stereotyping of the female didn't fit my experience at all. So a tradition that did put women in such a subservient role always irked me a little, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I can imagine. And so how did you respond to this? I mean...
Well, I suppose the next big turning point, I kept going with the Buddhism right up until, 1984. And I was really glad to have it, because it was a mainstay and a source of comfort and a community also.
Yeah.
But in 1984, I went to a conference in Cardiff, which was called Spirituality and Psychology, East and West. And it was a 3 or 4 day conference held at the university. Because these things had started to become a bit of an issue, really. Here in the West, we had psychotherapy, which was strong and which was helping people a lot.
Yeah.
And in the East, you had this wonderful resurgence of spirituality, and there was a kind of an uneasy mix, or perhaps not a mix. They were kept pretty much apart, really. There were people who were psychotherapists and psychologists, and then there were the spiritual people, but there were more and more of us who felt that they belonged together and they needed to be integrated. And I think one of the difficulties was that there was no tradition of psychotherapy in India, and all the spiritual all the spiritual creativity had been in the East, but all the psychological process had been in the West. So it seemed very important that some of us, and there were quite a lot of us at this conference, could begin the work of seeing how do these two things fit together, and how can the East also honor the role of psychology and psychotherapy, which isn't in their tradition, and how can the West achieve more of the spiritual wisdom of the East. So it was a fascinating conference, and that marked a sort of turning point. I'm aware that I was afraid I wouldn't be able to talk, and now I'm afraid I'm doing a Nick, and I'm talking your head off.
No, well, that's what it's for. That's absolutely fine. No, it's fascinating. Please carry on, Carol.
All right then. Well, I'll just have a drink of water.
Sure.
At that conference, I had something of a revelation. Yes, let me see how I can put it into words. The first couple of days were very austere, very male-dominated, kind of very learned lectures and papers. And then I think it was about the third day, and all the lecturers, and there were Buddhist teachers and quite high-up Buddhist people and others from other traditions, all men again. Whereas the audience, was very mixed. But on about the third day, it was announced that a Raj Yoga teacher and practitioner from the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University in Mount Abu, India, she would be coming. And she was actually flying from Delhi directly to Heathrow and then driving down to this venue, this university venue in Cardiff, to participate on the third day. And I was very interested in that and sort of waited for it with anticipation, and was actually amazed. There was this small lady dressed in white who'd just done journeys that would have given the rest of us jet lag and a desire to go to bed.
Sure.
She came into the room and she was radiant and sparkling and brought a very different energy to the whole proceedings. And she did a guided meditation for the whole group, which was based on what she called soul consciousness. And she gave a description of what the soul is and what it consists of, and said, now I'll take you into a meditation. And she did that. It lasted about 20 minutes, and it was very different from the Buddhist meditations. It gave me a different feel, mainly of being intrigued and interested rather than any deep spiritual experience as such. Kind of liking her, being grateful that at last a woman was being honored for her spirituality. And then we were given the choice. We were told that we could choose one of the leaders or the people that we'd heard to go into small seminar groups with.
Okay.
And with a sense of relief almost, I chose this little Indian lady who was called Sister Sudesh. And when the moment came for us to go into these groups, we ended up in quite a small room because there was only about 10 of us had chosen that. Everybody else had gone off with the big Buddhist gurus.
Yeah.
And what she did, she repeated the guided meditation again, emphasizing what she had to teach, which is that we are all souls and that the innate qualities of the soul are love, peace, purity, power, and happiness. And she used her voice and her meditative or yoga powers to communicate this in a way that, as she spoke, began to feel very, very real. And I began to experience these qualities as she spoke them. And it was an eyes open meditation.
Right.
And I opened my eyes, and the room was completely transformed, and I was transformed. My body just had turned into sort of vibrating light energy. She had turned into so I can only call it a vision of light.
Wow.
The other people in the room, the walls, the whole environment was vibrating with this incredible light, and I'd never known anything like it in my life. I was quite out of my comfort zone and my knowledge zone.
Yeah.
And what I felt was this double mixture of fear and joy. And it's a very strange sensation to have those two going along at the same time. Fear was, what on earth is happening? I don't understand this. And joy in, now I know reality isn't what I thought it was. It's got a lot more to do with light and a lot more to do with joy and happiness. And out of that mixture of sort of fear and joy came tears. So when the meditation ended, I was weeping copiously. And I seemed to be the only one to whom this had happened. Maybe one other, but less spectacularly, I think.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah, because that's quite a fascinating thing you've just described.
Yeah.
When you look back on it now,
Yes.
having happened all those years ago, what do you think was happening exactly to you?
I think I was being given a different perspective on reality that we're not these solid beings of flesh and bone and blood, but that we are beings of energy, we are beings of light, but that we've lost that capacity both to feel it and to see it. And the explanation in Raja Yoga for that is that you have to believe in reincarnation for this to work for you, that we've been through many, many, many lifetimes, and it's been a process of coming down spiritually from a much higher stage where these things of joy, of love, of peace, of purity, of lightness were our being, and we've descended and descended into matter, so that we've become totally identified with matter and with our bodies as being matter. And what this meditation was doing was giving you a chance to reconnect with your original nature, which is one of light, and that your original qualities are love, purity, peace, joy, happiness, and power. But the thing about it is, you get that glimpse, if you like, or that experience, but then you have to work at it. You don't walk away saying, I'm this other thing now.
No.
You're shown a path of meditation where you have to get back fully to those qualities in a permanent and real way, that these wonderful glimpses are a gift, and the rest of it is then your perseverance, your endurance, your belief, and it becomes... They call it easy Raj Yoga because that's what the tradition is. It's the Raj Yoga as taught by the Brahma Kumaris, an old Indian tradition. But then you're not just taken to the top of the stairs and left there. You're given a glimpse of the top of the stairs, but then you have to work your way up by really developing these 5, 6 spiritual qualities in your everyday life. And that was, such a powerful experience that it gave me the desire to work with it and to make those qualities that I glimpsed a real part of who I was.
So that's where this woman you described was coming from, was Raja Yoga, is it? She was... Okay, I get it, yeah. Wow, okay. So what happened then? What did you do after that? How did you react to that?
The next step, because I wanted the next step, she told me about. She said, well, we teach something called the 7-day course, which goes into a lot more detail about all of this. And also you can continue with these meditations. So she went back to India. So I located the centre, which existed in Cardiff at the time, found the teachers, did the 7-day course, and was sceptical and not convinced. And I think it may have had something to do with the actual quality and the degree of enlightenment of the teachers rather than the teaching, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for it. It was 1984. I still hadn't fully weaned myself from my Buddhist context. So this 7-day course didn't convince me, didn't help me very much, but for masses of people it does straight away. But what I still loved and wanted to do was the kind of meditation that Sister Sudesh had introduced me to, and I discovered that there were lots and lots of tapes, guided tape meditations. So I got some of those, and I suppose because I had the discipline and the habit of dedicating 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening to meditation, I took these tapes and I used them for years. I would follow a guided meditation on becoming aware that my reality was of a soul, not this body, that I was a being of light, and that my intrinsic qualities were the 5 that I keep mentioning, 5, 6, maybe a few more. And I kept working on that and loving it. So there was this sort of separation between accepting what they called the knowledge, which was this 7-day course, and my experience of yoga, of meditation, which was powerful and good and helpful. So there was that discrepancy for me. However, in 1990, I turned 50, and I retired from the university where, first of all, I'd been a French teacher, and then I'd become the student counsellor, so I'd had 2 different careers there. I decided I wanted to have a big adventure and do something bold, because if you don't do it at 50, when will you do it?
Yeah, sure.
And I decided to go to India for 3 months on my own. Well, I know lots of young women do that now, but it was a bit unheard of when 27 years ago when I did it.
Yeah.
And I gave quite a lot of worry and anxiety to my entourage.
Yes.
Probably, certainly to Colin, my husband, and I think to Nick a bit as well.
Yeah.
But I did it, and my purpose was, I think I somehow had lost this sense of being in touch with God, the original little girl's impulse that I told you about.
Yeah.
And I thought, I need to go to India because I'm pretty sure that I'll find him, her there. So that's what I did. And my aim was to visit spiritual places, ashrams, and learn what I could, and have meditation and have the independence of doing it alone. I took the Lonely Planet with me guide, and that was my companion. I think that's what got me around. Plus, I had a guide to the ashrams of India. And that's how I did it. I didn't go to hotels and spas. I went from ashram to ashram.
Right.
And I spent, I think it was a month in a Christian ashram run by a very wonderful Christian yogi who had he was a Benedictine monk who'd also embraced Indian spirituality and had set up an ashram in the south. He was called Bede Griffiths, has written a lot of books, was a very wise and kindly man, and I spent a month there. I went and dug out Sai Baba's place. Have you heard of Sai Baba?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Well, he was one of the great Indian gurus of the time who was known for his miracles. His main gift was he could manifest objects without trickery, because it was all very, very well observed. And he'd fill his hands with an ash called vibhuti, which was a healing ash. And the ash would appear from the palms of his hands, and you would see that happening. And he would give
Did you see that then?
Yes, I went to his ashram. I had an interview with him, and I saw him generate the vibhuti.
Wow.
But I did later learn that, these are spectacular things, and they're powerfully attractive things, but they don't really lead to the enlightenment of the students. They just lead to a lot of kind of fascination and obsession with the guru, if you see what I mean, as opposed to developing your own spiritual potential.
Yeah. The finger pointing at the moon, isn't it, really, I suppose?
Pardon?
It's the finger pointing at the moon, isn't it?
Yes, yes, that's right. But it was very, very interesting and sort of learningful. You know, you learned quite a bit about Indian traditions. I went into the room where he was giving his interview, and all the men were on one side and all the women were on the other side, separated in the room. And because I was on a bit of a high, a natural one, let me add. I never tried anything other like that.
Okay.
I thought, this is silly. The women's side of the room is packed. There's room on the men's side. So I went and sat over with the men and immediately got Sai Baba's attention. Sat off with the women saying, you know, don't you know how we sit in India? So that was a kind of reinforcement of the sort of thing that we as Westerners find difficult in Indian traditions. But anyway, to cut a long story short, this teacher who had given me the Raja Yoga course, but which hadn't particularly taken, had nonetheless said, if you are going to India, you must go to the headquarters of Raj Yoga, the Brahma Kumaris, which is in Mount Abu in Rajasthan. Make it part of your journey. And you know, I was sufficiently convinced by the meditation practice that I'd done ever since meeting Sister Sudesh. I was getting benefit from it. I was sort of empowered by it. And still very curious about the organization and the whole tradition. So at the end of 3 months, I got myself to Mount Abu in Rajasthan, and by now I was feeling pretty lonely, pretty exhausted, and basically ready to come home. But as soon as I stepped into these headquarters, the impact of the energy and the spiritual atmosphere was so powerful that I was sort of completely uplifted again. It was I was there for 3 weeks. The first week, it was a bit as if someone had lifted off the top of my head, and there was this incredible lightness everywhere. That must have lasted for maybe a week and a half. And then I fell ill, which is often something that happens when you're going through a process of purification. I had the most appalling flu symptoms, a terrible sore throat, and I must have spent about a week and a half in bed trying to recover with the help of homeopathy, and I was shown quite a lot of care by the people who lived there or were visiting there, because there was a large community of residents in Mount Abu, mainly women, but no bar on the men who were also working there and, you know, part of the whole thing. But there was this tremendous relief that here women were being acknowledged, honored, were being given the primary roles as teachers, as spiritual leaders, and they were amazing people. They were flying the world, just like Sister Sudesh, at a drop of a hat, had come all the way to this strange little place called Cardiff to take part in a rather odd seminar. These women who are now getting on, they were in their 70s and 80s, and now some of them have reached 100, teaching, traveling, setting up centers, broadcasting, and were having the feminine qualities honored, and not made sort of subservient to the male qualities, which are still, very much appreciated and used. But for that to happen in India was extraordinary, because there's still, difficulties with being a woman in India outside of this kind of spiritual context.
Sure, yeah, you see it on the news, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. And that again that was another turning point. From 1990 on, I decided this is it. I'm going to follow this more seriously. I'm convinced, because again I had the experience of after the illness, I once again began to feel the lightness, the joy, a sense of having come home. They had a definition of God that I could relate to, which I could experience almost, unlike the Christian definitions, which was so much, it seemed to me, to be about this powerful old man in the sky who could be wrathful and who could, I don't know, do all the sorts of things that the Christian God is supposed to have done in biblical terms. That I found very difficult, once childhood was past, difficult to take on board, because the definition of God for the Brahma Kumaris is a point of pure energy and light, containing to the utmost degree those 6 or 7 qualities of love, purity, power, peace, joy, goodness, and that that made sense. I could work with that. I could see God in that context, and of course it corresponded with that experience I'd had in 1984.
Yeah, I was going to say that that would, I suppose, judging by what we were just saying there, that would be. You could describe that as experiencing God, would you say? The experience you had in 1984?
Yes, I think it was... Yes, I experienced some of his qualities, because I did experience a great joy, and that's one of the qualities that God has in abundance. And I experienced being a being of light myself, and the people all around me were beings of light. So when God was described as a being of light, made absolute sense, the only sense that that I could stay with and really believe in. But then again, the path starts again, and it's as if the image they use in Raj Yoga is that you're climbing a ladder, and that you go up so many steps, and then because of your old sanskars, which is the Indian word for old ingrained habits. Right. They're strong, and they pull you back, and you get tired or you lose your resolve. So it's a path where I've been keeping going since 1990. They have a morning class every day, which is called the Murli, the Flute of Knowledge. They have a lot of yoga sessions. They have a tradition of, it's called Amrit Vela, which is waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and linking yourself to the best of your ability.
So you do that every day, do you?
I do my best. I do it a lot. I did it this morning.
Right.
Now I'm nearly 78, and one has to take the physical constitution into consideration more. The capacity to become tired is there much more as you get older, and I've had to deal with some very severe and sad bereavements, and all of that takes emotional energy. And when you're using, and there was Nick's illness, which he talked about,
yes.
which was a huge thing for a mother to go through. And then gradually, the people around me that I love, family people, they're either in their 90s and suffering quite a lot, or they've already left the body. So although I went to, yes, I do Amrit Vela, it's called, the Nectar Hour, as often as I possibly can, which can amount to 5 times a week.
Wow.
I read this class, the Merli, every day. We don't have a centre in Cardiff anymore. At one time, we were able to go to the centre and all listen to it and read it together, but that doesn't exist here anymore because there have been a lot of changes in what's called the family of Brahma Kumaris over the years. And the main thing I was able to do when I was younger, from 1990 onwards, I went to Mount Abu in Rajasthan every year and spent about 3 weeks there. And each time encountering again that very, very powerful and beautiful energy that's there, which does the double business. It both lightens you and it cleans you up a bit more, if you see what I mean, sort of psychologically and spiritually. You become aware of what there is about you, which is still not all love, light, purity, power, and truth. You slip back into your, and here we go back to psychology, the inherited traits of our personality, which could be a bit depressive or a bit fearful or a bit jealous, or, the things that we carry inside us. These are the things that tend to come to the surface when you're in a very highly spiritual place like Mount Abu, and you see them with clarity and you say, well, I still have that to work on. That is still coming up. But a lot of the time, it's as if you're given a holiday from all of that, and you feel light and positive and energized by being back in that atmosphere and with those people. But the last time I went was in 2011, and I found the journey and the experience of India rather more exhausting. The sheer business of flying and jet lag, and it's quite a big journey then from airports up to Mount Abu in Rajasthan. And I was pretty exhausted when I was there and pretty exhausted when I got back, as well as having had this wonderful boost of spiritual energy. And so my sort of drama now, my trauma is now, that was 2011, can I make it again? Because every year it's a year older, not a year lighter, not a year easier. And the numbers have increased incredibly at that place because more and more people know about it, want to go there. So there can be 27,000 at a time for one of the meetings, and they have 8 or 10 meetings a year. Jesus. So you're dealing, with great crowds. So there's that. Perhaps I'm turned into a bit of a wimp. I don't know. I hesitate to commit to going again. On the other hand, the leader of the organization, who is called Daddy Janki, is 100, and she whips back and forth there all the time.
Do you think, you were saying it's kind of got a lot bigger, do you think that on a a sort of wider worldview that this kind of thing is becoming more prominent?
Oh, yes, definitely. The Brahma Kumaris have got a word for this particular period, which they say only lasts for about 100 years, which is the confluence age. And the confluence age is, confluence means two things meeting. And the understanding is that we're emerging from the Iron Age, which is the lowest depth that humanity can sink to. And we've got a lot of evidence of that with the world wars, the concentration camps. And almost on a weekly, monthly basis, if you're following the news, the sort of people who are emerging in the world now as world leaders. I won't mention any names. And the prevalence of fundamentalist violence, intolerance, racism, it's at an all-time high, as is poverty and social deprivation. But at the same time, the spiritual movements are all growing. I occasionally go on my computer to these various channels, and they're just packed with videos about human potential and growth and change and spiritual techniques and meditations. You see all that, presumably?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yes. So this is the other bit of the confluence. On the one hand, you've got this river of darkness and negativity, and on the other hand, you've got this great sort of golden stream of we all want to become enlightened, we want to become better people, we want to learn these self-growth techniques, and that's the other river, if you like, that's meeting this negative river. This is the positive flow now of energy, which, in terms of the Brahma Kumaris' belief, is what is going to herald in the new golden age, which is in our mythology, it's in our awareness, but historically it's been lost, to civilization, except in Indian cultures and traditions where they do seem to have a memory and even scriptures which describe the coming of a golden age of humanity when we are all back in those 5-6 great spiritual qualities. But naturally, this is who we are. This is not then a meditation practice or a psychotherapy course. It's who we can, become once again.
Yeah. Our default setting, so to speak.
Sorry?
Our default setting, so to speak.
Did you say a default?
Yes.
So explain that a bit.
A default setting, so it's not somewhere we need to strive to, it's somewhere where we are.
Well, yes, we haven't reached the aim of the confluence age.
No.
In that we're not, most of us as beings, sort of complete and perfect, and we don't have the golden age mentality yet, but we have a yearning for it. We understand how it might be, and we would like to be like that again. We would prefer to be good, loving, kind, altruistic, to being prejudiced and racialist and negative and warlike. So, humanity is on a stream, is on a course to rediscovering its potential best and greatness. And, that's one of the things that I like about the Brahma Kumaris' Raj Yoga teachings, is that there is this hope and optimism involved in it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And if someone's listening to us talking here and they're interested in experiencing what you've experienced regarding regarding all this, what would you say that their best first step is if they don't know anything about, where to go next?
Well, I'm not very computer savvy, but I find a lot of things on YouTube. Brahma Kumari's .org, is it? Something like that.
Okay, I'll try and find out. And
I sort of go there automatically. They're no, I don't mean that, but I just press a few buttons without knowing too much what I'm doing.
Sure.
Yes, there's a lot of it on YouTube now. It used to be all very private, but now it's open to the world. And there are classes. Oh, there's Raja Yoga TV, which is very helpful.
Okay.
rajayoga.org TV, something like that. But I'm sure you're so savvy that you'll find it.
What I'll try and do is find it and put it underneath the interview so people can just click on it. That would probably be the best thing, yeah.
Okay.
That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Carol. I really appreciate that. And it sounds like you've had an extraordinary life.
Well, when you're living inside it, it's just your life, really, and you don't know too much how it differs from other people's. But you seeing it from the outside would sort of be able to see that in a way that I've, just been living it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah. That would seem like a good place to wrap it up. As I say, it's been absolutely fascinating. I've just been sitting here riveted, quite frankly. So thank you so much.
Well, can I say that you were very easy to talk to, a very good interviewer. I had quite a lot of apprehension about doing this and initially said I wouldn't, and then I came to my senses and realised I would, and I'm glad I did.
I'm very glad you did too as well. Thank you so much.